Wondering what it's like to get a job after school? Today, I'm going to talk about my first job out of graduate school, how I applied for that job, the process I went through. And stay tuned because near the end, I'm going to reveal how much the offer was and how I negotiated. Hi, I'm Ryan Sinet, and thanks for tuning into my channel. Okay, so I graduated Caltech in 2007 with a bachelor's in electrical engineering, and then I went on to graduate school. I actually didn't graduate until 2015, and I graduated with my PhD in mechanical engineering, and I'd focused on robotics. But I really wanted to get into software. I wanted to get a software job. Now, that wasn't such a stretch for me because I'd been programming probably already 20 something years at that point, since I was about 7 years old. But I didn't really have a whole lot of relevant experience. I did some startups in my teens, but I really didn't have any meaningful industry experience. So, knowing what I know now, not knowing at the time, but as a, recruiter looking at that resume, someone doing the hiring, they're probably scratching their heads like, boy, what is it? He may have applied for the wrong job. So definitely wasn't straightforward. I was graduating with a PhD, and my advisor wanted me to go into academia, wanted me to be a professor. And of course, I always had the safety net of, okay, you could always do a postdoc while you're searching for jobs. And, I was seriously entertaining the possibility, but my heart wasn't really in it. I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to get into industry. So I set out searching for jobs. I just went on the internet. Looked up every possible job I could in Los Angeles. I wanted to move back. I was graduating from Texas A&M in College Station, Texas. But I went to undergrad at Caltech in Pasadena, and I wanted to come back around that area. I really loved Los Angeles. I'm from Northern California, so I thought it would be great to just be back there. My sister lived there, and it was just a place I was comfortable with, and a lot of good job opportunities. The best opportunities tend to come in the bigger cities. It just attracts more talent. So, I figured it's there. There's not a lot of, it's Silicon Valley, but didn't really want to go up there. So I came back to Los Angeles. So what I did is I went on the internet, went on LinkedIn, went on Indeed, searched all these different job sites. I knew I was just going to go at this thing hard, 14 hours a day until I had found the job. And so I went on, I looked for many different possible jobs from a variety of companies. If they had robotics, all the better because my experience would kind of lend itself to that. But I ultimately ended up applying for about 20 companies after searching for 2 weeks straight. For every job I applied for, I customized my resume, made sure it fit the job description appropriately, and I wrote a specific cover letter. And some of the type of ways that I explained my contribution would be, or my potential contribution would be, hey, this is my background, and this is why I think I can come in and immediately make a contribution to the company. Okay, so 20 job applications, PhD in robotics, right? You think, oh, it must be easy to find a job. Well, this was 2015, and no, it was not easy. I actually only got 2 interviews from that entire 20 applications that I sent out. And, 2 of those interviews, so I flew out here and I did those interviews. One of them was at a company called Applied Minds, which is in Burbank, and that company's still around. It was founded by 2 guys from Disney. And then another one was in the solar power industry. It was at a company called eSolar, and they did concentrated solar thermal. And they were looking for a control software engineer. Now, despite, having sent out so many, a 10% like even interview rate, that's not very good. Okay. So these companies wanted to interview me. I don't really know the basics of software because I didn't have a CS degree, didn't really take any of the courses. And despite having the confidence that I could just sit down and code, I figured I really ought to know some of the kind of standard materials that they're going to ask me about in these interviews and do a little prep. So I cracked open like 3 or 4 books. One of them was like an introduction to algorithms book. It was the thick book. You can find it if you look for it. Another one was the design patterns book from 1994 by Eric Gamma and others. And another one was like cracking the coding interview. So I did some of the work through some of the coding in that book. I went to my parents' house in Northern California, and I spent about 2 weeks just reading all day and preparing for the interviews. And by the time the interviews came up, I did a few remote interviews, and then they eventually flew me in to interview. And I crushed the interviews. I even, some of the people who interviewed me, I believe some of the words were, that was one of the best interviews I've had in recent memory. And, I didn't even really know that computer science. I didn't have that background in it, but I took it really seriously. I went in there, I dressed, wore pants and a nice shirt, and I really took the studying seriously, and I made sure that I really understood that material. And when it came time to go in and do that interview, I made sure that I would go in there, have a great interaction with everyone and just really show them what I could do. And so it was great. So I scheduled those interviews on the same weekend, flew out there, they paid for it. And I, sat through a couple different interviews. Great success in both of them. The first interview with Applied Minds, it was the guy was asking me, hey, can you design some type of library system? Show me the classes. What would it look like in Java? And I started doing it, and he's like, okay, I don't think we need to continue this interview any further. I think he was just doing a little sanity check and was like, okay, you obviously passed this. We started talking about some other advanced concepts. How would you implement a search function? And so I just started talking about graph theory and whatever came to mind in terms of how I would model natural language. And so that led to a much more interesting conversation than I think, would have been the subject of the interview. So, just saying, hey, I can think creatively. I'm going to be able to help you solve novel problems. And I wanted to demonstrate that. Now, when I went to interview at eSolar, I sat down, and this was really interesting because some of my classmates from Caltech worked there. So I actually got interviewed by some of them, by some pretty smart people. But they asked me questions that are, fairly standard software questions, and I was able to answer most of those pretty well. I think I couldn't fully work out some of the optics problems, but it was pretty apparent that I knew how to approach the problem and solve it. So overall, I did pretty well on those problems. And at the end of that interview, that day of interviews at eSolar, I was made an offer. And they came in and told me, we want to make you an offer on the spot. And we want to offer you $110,000 a year. And I said, boy, that's a really generous offer. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. Is it okay if I take this offer back? I want to talk to my father about it, think about it a little bit more and come back to you with a decision. And they said, sure, great. Thank you. We're really excited. I don't know that offers are often made on the spot, but obviously the interview went pretty well, so they were comfortable making me an offer on the spot. So then I did go home and I talked to my father and said, what should I do? Blah, blah, blah. And so, okay. So we decided, well, I should come back and say, I really want to work here, but would you be okay offering me $120,000 a year? And they came back and they said 115, and we ultimately settled on that. Now, I talked to some different people who were graduating from Texas A&M at the same time, and I think that salary was pretty high for most of the graduates. But I think that is a testament to how seriously I took the process, how I was energetic and engaged, and showed that I'm a good collaborator. And ultimately, they were very happy. I did very well at that company. And actually, I'll tell you, after about 12 months of working there, I was actually offered a $50,000 bonus to stay for at least 4 more months. And so I did actually stay and make that additional bonus. So after the first 6 months, I was at that 115K, but then after 6 months in, I actually ended up making 165,000 that year. So it was quite a bit more than I was expecting, and I was actually pretty happy with that. So I actually ended up working at eSolar for about 18 months. But then after then, I actually left and went to found my own startup called Miso Robotics, and that company is still around today and is doing quite well. But that's a different story for a different time. So that's the video. Thanks for watching. What strategies or tactics did you use to negotiate your first job? I want to hear about it. Leave some comments below. And don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to this channel for future notifications. And so until next time, we'll see you later.